Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where we continue to examine how we think, feel, and behave with money. And we're going to continue the review of Happy Money, The Science of Happier Spending, a book written by Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton. I incorporated this book into the Financial Symposium here at Redstone Arsenal on the 25th of March, 2025. A lot of positive feedback based on this book. It gave folks a new way of looking at their money. Instead of thinking of their money as something that needed to be increased to make them happier, it gave them a new framework of how to become wiser with their money, increasing wisdom and not increasing the money itself. Increasing wisdom on how to spend and how to consume, and not necessarily on how to increase income. So one of the things the authors talked about, we talked about buying experiences. We also talked about the transcendent strawberry. We talked about different research and scarcity being an ally when it comes to abundance, and how abundance can get us into trouble, especially when we lose pleasure in something that has brought us joy in the past, especially if it's a coffee, or for me, it was meals out. I shared that story with the group. It just kind of lost its luster. So now that we make it a treat, it's much more enjoyable for the family. And it's the same thing that you could do with your coffee and whatever else you might be purchasing a little more often than maybe you like. So now we're going to get into buying time and what that does for us. Time truly is our most valuable currency. And I think folks who have a terminal illness would agree with that, or folks that have certain anxieties with events would agree with that. And certainly folks that are working full time and taking their kids, burning up the roads, getting them from event to event, how time in and of itself is scarce. So how could we use our time more effectively to increase our overall subjective well-being, which is just a clinical term for happiness? So a lot of us will think of different electronics or different devices or different gadgets when it comes to buying time. And one of the gadgets that the book offers is the Roomba. So they might think of, okay, I purchased this expensive vacuum cleaner to buy myself some time while I'm away. It will do the vacuuming for me. And if you've ever had a Roomba, I personally have not, because of the stories that I've heard in therapy sessions about the Roomba. And by the way, this does not imply Army endorsement, and nor does it imply an Army rejection of the Roomba. It is simply a story to bring about the concept of buying time. So it doesn't have to be a Roomba by name. It could be any vacuum cleaner or device, maybe even a lawnmower that is supposed to perform that job while you're gone. There are always going to be pros and cons, but one of the cons that I would hear most about the robotic vacuum cleaners is if your pet makes a mess while you're gone, the robot is not able to differentiate between when it should stop and when it should continue. So I'll let you create the visual in your head of what that looks like, the cleaning, the repairs, and what your house might look like when you walk into the house. So we think of those devices, we think of those gadgets, and then it helps us justify purchasing those gadgets. And that's all well and fine. And in fact, the book encourages us to find those things that are in alignment with our values that will assist us in buying more time. One of the things that my family and I just did, my oldest just turned 16, and she wanted a summer job but she does have honors and AP classes, and we didn't necessarily want her to get involved in a job that may give her some, I guess, motivation to continue during the fall. It's not that we don't want her to work. It's already hard enough without a job to keep her schedule moving and completing homework and having time to spend with the family, having time to do the things that she loves. So the family and we offered to allow her to take her sister, who's only 11, back and forth to her practices for her sport during the summer. So that will be her summer job, is carting her back and forth. Because one, it makes financial sense that my husband and I do not take work off, because it would cost a lot more money for us to take that time off during the day to bus her back and forth to those practices. So we were able to offer our oldest that job where she'll get paid a pretty good amount to do that for us. And it decreases the overall stress for us, but increases her income. So it's a win-win. So that's an example of what you would do to help yourself buying time. And it's the same with other folks. There are families who, instead of taking their children to daycare, they may choose to hire a nanny who could bus their children throughout the day through all of their activities and also make dinner. I mean, there's a win-win situation as well. So those types of things buy time. Or, as I've done in the past, and I've said in the past too, I've also hired my children to do my housekeeping. Instead of paying a stranger, I pay my children, and it's a win-win situation. But here's the thing. Why are we even wanting to buy time? If we're doing that and we're paying a little more so that we have more time that we can spend on doing whatever we want, are we spending that free time wisely? So there's a difference between prioritizing time over possessions or possessions prioritizing time over us. And one of the bigger things that are discussed in that is reducing the amount of television that we watch or the amount of scrolling that we do on our phone. Have we truly bought time for ourselves if that's what we're going to continuously engage in? And the stats on that are pretty interesting as far as the book and their research is concerned. We spend an average of 2 months per year. 2 months per year. And there are only 12 months if you're not doing the math. 2 of those 12 months in the year, we are spending watching television, and it offers little emotional reward when compared to other activities. So it has diminishing returns. And too much of even an enjoyable activity can backfire. Another one that they talked about is reducing commuting. Longer commutes, even for better homes or jobs, don't lead to greater happiness, and those eat into valuable time as well. Here's a quote from the book. So they're talking about commuters here. They are no more satisfied with their homes, and they are less satisfied with their jobs. So they give a quick example of how commuters, they justify all of this time it takes to get to a job by thinking, oh, we're going to be more satisfied with our house, we'll get the bigger house, and then we'll also be more satisfied with our jobs, but actually it has the opposite effect. So instead of watching excess TV or commuting more than we really need to be, it talks about using that time to truly prioritize relationships. So if we are engaging in a contract with someone, maybe to cut our grass or to do our housekeeping, making sure that that time that was bought for us is spent prioritizing relationships. Spending time with loved ones truly is what creates the most happiness. And they warn us not to fall into the trap of trading quality time for material possessions, both in our personal lives and in providing for our children. Because ultimately, happiness does not come from having more things or even more time, but from using our existing resources to consciously create a life filled with meaningful connections and experiences. So let me talk first about prioritizing time over possessions. There's this thing called time affluence and material affluence. We're all familiar with material affluence because I'm sure you watched the news many years ago and heard the term for the first time, affluenza, where there are these affluent children or affluent children who just have so much time on their hands and endless resources, and they tend to not prioritize their time well and get into trouble. Parties that go downhill real fast and someone ends up getting hurt. We think then of material affluence in the same way. Let's look through each of these. So time affluence, that means we have plenty of free time. And we have to remember that free time is scarce. And one of the things we need to focus on is optimizing free time. Not maximizing, but optimizing. When we optimize our free time, it reduces pressure. It feels more natural, and it brings about a longer lasting, lingering joy, and it also promotes mindfulness. But when we maximize time, and we're trying to fit as much as possible into that time, it increases pressure, it feels robotic, it provides fleeting happiness, and it promotes mindlessness. That's when we start making those mistakes. So even with time affluence, when we have plenty of free time, we need to optimize rather than maximize. So that means increasing connection. And the more that we connect, oddly enough, the more it compounds time affluence. And the more that we are optimizing time, the more it compounds time affluence. So we're accumulating experiences when we're focused on time affluence over material affluence. So material affluence is simply plenty of stuff. There's an overabundance. We're trying to maximize everything that we have, whether you're doing this out of a status symbol or you're wanting to show the Joneses that you can keep up with them. But it increases our stress levels. Then we're more pressed for time, and then it decreases time affluence. So now our free time diminishes. And that focus, rather than being focused on accumulating experiences, now we're focused on acquiring more possessions. Feeling time affluent rather than just material affluent is key to living a more satisfying life. So, despite the common belief that wealth and stuff brings happiness, studies show that wealthier individuals often report higher stress levels. This could be because greater wealth and therefore more accumulation often comes at the expense of free time, which is crucial for well-being and happiness. And we tend to overvalue things that are scarce, as we just learned in the scarcity being our ally with the candy corn, the pumpkin spice, the Disney Vault, the McRib. We overvalue those things that are scarce. And so our own time should be one of those things that we should overvalue as well, not necessarily our possessions. So this perception of time scarcity, fueled by our increasingly busy lives, leads to feeling more pressed for time, even though we may have more free time than previous generations. I love how the book points that out for us, because even when we look at time as scarce, if we're not prioritizing the time well, then it's just going to turn out just to be another stressful thing that we need to navigate. Here's another thing that we talked about, and what Happy Money discussed. Pay now, consume later. But the audience, you're probably more familiar with buy now, pay later. And that includes buying something with a credit card and then paying it off monthly, or with a true buy now, pay later program. And by the way, did you know that those buy now, pay later apps, they're new, but they've been around just long enough to now we're getting to see how problematic they are. Many of them, you cannot even get a hold of them if they're listed on your credit report and you need to dispute or you need to correct something on your credit report. It is very difficult to get a hold of some of these companies. So buyer beware. If you don't have the money to purchase something, unless it's food. I'm not talking Uber food, Uber Eats. I'm not talking, and by the way, that's becoming more popular where you can now do the buy now, pay later for different food apps and food delivery programs. So I'm talking if you need groceries, that's one thing, right? Just to survive. But when you are using these buy now, pay later apps, or even buy now, pay later in the use of a credit card, and these are for things that you don't need for survival, these are the things that are making you feel crushed and making you feel pressed and making you feel like you will never get out of living from paycheck to paycheck. And that's not bringing happiness to anybody, if that is that kind of pressure that you're constantly experiencing. So this is why the authors talk now about pay now, consume later. And it's not just about paying cash and then putting something on hold and then pulling out of the closet later. That's not what they're talking about. They go further into the brain science behind our brains on spending. There's the chemical reaction that we have through dopamine, and there's the regional activation that we have in our brain called the nucleus accumbens. And so I want you to think about, as you're driving, as you're listening to this podcast, or if you're just piddling around the house, what happens to you when I use the words same day delivery and next day shipping? I'm pausing for effect, and I'm pausing for you to gather your answer. A lot of folks are going to say, hey, sign me up. Boy, that's easy. That'll buy me time, right? Well, the dopamine fires, that nucleus accumbens, that region in your brain starts lighting up. And what is happening is your brain is telling you, now, I can have this now. So there's this allure of that terminology, now. So here's a French word, and I'm going to try and say it correctly. It's se réjouir, and that is basically providing you a sense of pleasure for the actual consumption. It's like this sense of joy, and I'll take a quote right out of Happy Money. The French use this word to capture the experience of deriving pleasure in the present from anticipating the future. The se réjouir period provides a source of pleasure that comes free with purchase, supplementing the joy of actual consumption. Let me tell you what that looks like. So they provide an example in the book about a girl who purchases a Barbie, but I'm going to bring it home with my own example, having two little girls that have grown up in my house. All parents, I'm sure you will have some positive or negative associations with this story, but every single birthday, every single Christmas because we are so blessed with connections, with family, with friends, just an overwhelming amount of folks in our lives that will send them something or give them something. These girls would have a mountain of gifts to open. And my husband and I would sit there and think, oh, I wish more people would just put money into their college savings or give them a bond, a savings bond, or something like that. But they know how children are. They want the excitement of opening that gift, right? Going back to the arcades, that reward center. They want those kids to remember them for that. But what happens is when the kids open these gifts, they've gone through multiple gifts, and 3 months later, when you're helping them navigate through their pigsty of a room, you see halfway open gifts. You see one part of a jewelry making kit mixed up with another jewelry making kit, and no wonder it's not working because some of the tools got mixed up, and now it's adding stress and it's adding pressure to this child's life. And now, instead of it becoming an enjoyable gift, it is now a source of anger. It is now a source of just strife amongst this child, or even within the family system as well. So what I learned to do, even though they didn't pay for these gifts, I started, once they opened all the gifts and they got to say their thank yous, my husband and I would secretly pack away about 2/3 of those gifts, put them up in the attic. And then every once in a while, we would go pull, maybe every month, pull one of those unused gifts. And especially if they weren't yet developmentally appropriate, open it when it was developmentally appropriate, where they actually have the manual dexterity that it requires to do one of these experiments or complete one of these experiments. Or if you didn't want them to complete one of the experiments in your house, you give them the gift when they're going to Nana's house so that you don't get the glitter all over your house. So that's just an example of pay now, consume later. Now, again, the kids are not paying for that gift. Someone else has, but they get to anticipate over those months, because they eventually caught on. They get to anticipate, okay, next month, Mom's going to give me a brand new, unopened gift. I don't know which one it's going to be. I'll get to complete it. It'll be something that I get to do with my mom or my dad or my sister, and it brings more connection. That's just one example. But I will talk about the example a little bit more that they bring up in the book. It does require some mention. So this girl, she purchases a Barbie, and she uses her own money to purchase the Barbie, and it takes forever for this Barbie to come in. So she's already paid for it, and she'll be consuming that toy much later because it, first of all, she had to afford it, save for it, finally purchase it, and now she'll get it in the mail soon enough. So while she's waiting for the gift, there's this thing that happens where that se réjouir occurs, where she gets that joy of anticipation of my Barbie's going to be coming in soon, or the drool factor. Oh man, I can't wait to put this Barbie doll next to my other Barbies, and I get to see my complete collection. So this child is drooling before she even gets the Barbie. And again, now she even knows that I've already paid for it. So when I actually get it, there's going to be a different feeling. I'm not in debt to it. And so she finally gets it. And that same region of the brain that helps us look forward to the joy of anticipating something or a purchase is the same area of the brain that quickly forgets something or loses enjoyment in something. So wouldn't you know, she gets the Barbie, plays with it for a couple days, then it goes on the shelf, never to be played with again. Now, they're not trying to talk themselves out of their own concept of paying now, consuming later, but what would have worked better for this child had she done something in between for this Barbie to be more enjoyable for her? So let's talk a little bit more about how the buy now, pay later culture is killing us. The allure of buy now, pay later, offered by credit cards, creates a sense of detachment, blinding us from the true cost of our spending. This psychological trick makes us more willing to spend beyond our means, leading to underestimation of our expenses and ultimately decreased happiness. And let me tell you, by just how much it led to an underestimation of our expenditures. By 30%. People who were stuck in the buy now, pay later cycle or culture, because of that sense of detachment, they could not recall in accuracy how much they spent. They completely underestimated their expenses by 30%. That's incredible. Here's a quote from the book. The lure of paying later, Visa's response to a satirical column that they had. They mentioned, and by the way, this is not a quote, but the book did quote a satirical column that was written. It was basically, the title was Visa Exposed as Massive Credit Card Scam. So here was the response from Visa. Sure, people should have known better than to trust a magical card that allowed them to buy anything they want without any money whatsoever. But at Visa, we understand that people will believe anything if they want it bad enough. That was the genius of our whole scheme. So I found that very interesting, the way they responded to a satirical column that was not really calling out Visa, but just being funny with it, like, gosh, Visa's a total scam, with how they're taking advantage of us. But it wasn't meant to be factual, more of a funny thing. Yet Visa came out and defended itself with that statement. And I thought that was incredible because they really tapped into human nature, that we are more likely to fall prey to believing what we want to believe. And people will continuously spend money that they know that they don't have because someone is allowing them to. So we're at close to 30 minutes here. So we'll go ahead and stop this episode, and then I'll continue with the next one to wrap up Happy Money.